All right, very excited to bring our next speaker to the stage. He used to be a lieutenant colonel in the Royal Marines, so best behavior, everyone. But now he helps companies win battles of a different kind, transformation. He has a fresh take on culture, and he has a real compass for strategy. And I'm excited to bring him to the stage to talk about all of the above. Please welcome to the stage Chris Paton, who's the Managing Director for Quirk Solutions.
Peak post-lunch lull right now, so I'm going to do my best to keep you entertained and engaged for the next 20 minutes. And I'm also conscious that the one thing I want you to really take away from this talk is the importance of connecting culture, leadership, and strategy. The reason why I've therefore put it as my first slide is because you're probably going to stop listening to me in about the next 5 seconds. That's fine. All right? But it is important that we connect these things together. There was a study done by Duke University not so long ago that globally CEOs that were surveyed said that over 90% of them said that they felt that culture was an integral part of achieving their strategic objectives. But only 30% of them were happy with their organization's culture. And I've been chatting to people in the breaks, been chatting to people outside as we've been going along, and talking about this piece here about the intentional tying together of culture, leadership, and strategy. And comments that I've been getting back mostly is that as chief people officers, as chief data people, and et cetera, we often struggle to be part of that strategic conversation, right? So you've got these leaders who believe that culture is important to strategy but don't want to talk to you about culture, which is the stuff that you own. And where did I find this important? Well, actually, as mentioned, I spent a lot of time in the Royal Marines, nearly 18 years. And my last job, having served several times in Afghanistan, was to be head of strategy on Afghanistan to David Cameron when he was the Prime Minister. And at this point, we announced that we were going to be pulling all of the combat troops out of Afghanistan and bringing them back to the UK and all the combat equipment. But that meant a fundamental shift in strategy, right? We were going from war fighting, which we've been doing for the last 10 years, and shifting across into training the Afghan forces and stepping back and bringing back this equipment. So I really cut my teeth on this concept of marrying up what the strategy is with the leadership that's required, because that shift required a very different type of leadership in Afghanistan on the ground at that point in time. A very different culture, one where we were supporting our Afghan partners much more. But the same lessons draw across commercially. So having left the Royal Marines just over 13 years ago and set up this business, I found myself working with a technology company called Babel Cloud. Some of you may have come across them or not. And we worked with them for 6 years as they grew from 35 people to over 600. They were a highly acquisitive business, right? They spent 6 years buying business after business. At one point, they bought 20 businesses in a 2-year period. And all of this was driven through a private equity firm that were backing them. And the private equity firm weren't that keen on leadership development. They weren't that keen on that, looking after the people within the business and helping them grow. So the CEO, Matt Parker, really great guy, very hard-driving, hard-charging CEO, he put additional budget into each acquisition that he then spent on leadership development. So he was tying together that strategy of go, buy more firms, grow as fast as we can, with leadership development for his team that created leaders that fitted that strategy, and with a culture that did it as well. So they were providing culture diagnostics of the acquisitions before they came in to match and marry the culture up. So this, at this point in time, is a real success story, right? Around marrying up culture, strategy, and leadership, and a success story on the business as well, right? They did tenfold revenue across that 6 years, maintaining a 30% EBITDA. Then you come to about 18 months ago, when the markets get a little bit more shaky and the private equity are less keen to start to lend money and provide investment. So they turned round to the organisation and to Matt Parker and said, we're not going to fund any more acquisitions for the next 18 months, 2 years. You are going to grow organically. That is a fundamental different shift in strategy, right? And a change in strategy as to how it's going about it. But they still didn't fund any change in cultural development or leadership training. So you now have a whole bunch of people who spent 6 years hard charging, go, go, go. That's what success is all built on and what the company enjoyed and people in the company enjoyed. And now it's not. It's all about process and systems and customer engagement and all of this stuff slowing down, being very deliberate. And because they didn't do any change in leadership development or culture, within 6 months, Matt had gone. And he left the business because he just couldn't basically sit with what was happening within the business. Since Matt has gone, they've also lost their chief commercial officer, and they've lost a whole bunch of people at a C-suite level. So this stuff is important. And in an environment that we're in at the moment, where, as we heard this morning, the strategic context is so uncertain, it's so fast moving, we need to really think about this stuff. Not just so much about the strategy, but about that culture and leadership tying together. But it's always been difficult, right, to measure culture. And we've got employee engagement surveys, employee NPS, things like that, Hogan assessments. But it's tricky to get a number on culture. And so I'm a big fan of Matthew Said's work. And Matthew Said talks about the benefits of layering different models, taking different methodologies, different platforms, and layering them together to basically get closer to the truth of what you want to achieve. So we looked at doing this, and the culture measurement tool that we really liked, they came up with, is called the Competing Values Framework, or the OCAI. It's worked by Cameron and Quinn. It's been around for about 25 years. It's a pretty tried and tested methodology. And it basically says that every organization has a range from being really flexible and nimble, or quite structured and controlled, or having an internal or an external focus, which creates these 4 quadrants or 4 dimensions, right? So you have one which is all about collaboration. It's all about this caring, nurturing environment where people come to work because they like the relationships they have with the people next to them. In tension with that, in competition with that, you have this compete, high achievement, push, 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 let's go and win. And that can be against the market with your competitors, but it also sometimes can be internally within the organization, where teams are selling different products and services, or offering different products and services to the same client pool. So they won't talk to each other about which clients they're working with, and they won't share anything internally. You have a control quadrant. So this is where it's about processes, systems, flow charts, that sort of thing. So this is where you often see lots of engineering types of companies, transport, power stations, things like that. And again, in tension with that is this creative, entrepreneurial, risk-taking, let's get out there. It's about new products, new services. So that's the cultural model. And the kind of light bulb moment really for us was that we were also looking at Robert House's work around path goal theory. And path goal theory essentially says there are 4 predominant types of leadership that you shift through at different points in time, right? So you have the participative leader saying, what do you think? I'm interested in your ideas. That feeds into that creative side of the culture. You have a directive leader that sits with the control piece, supportive, and achievement orientated. Now, obviously, we all know that we will shift around in our leadership depending on the situation, right? If you take me back, 18 odd years, and I'm in an ambush somewhere with bullets flying, I'm not going to be sitting there going, now, what does everybody think we should do right now, right? And being participating. You're going to be quite directive. But at the same time, when you get back into the base and it's all calmed down, it's like, right, talk to me about what happened. How can we do this better? What can we do? So you are shifting around. But the interesting thing for me was that you could take these two very different academic models that have been around for a long time, and you could superimpose them. And you could see how the culture is being affected by the leadership. And the nice thing also about the model is that it asks people about their perceptions currently of the culture, but also what they would like the culture to be in the future. It then looks at the leadership questions, and it's a weighted average system, basically. You get 100 points per question. You get 4 choices as to how you can respond. And I know you can't see it at the back, I'm sorry, but it doesn't really matter because you'll get the principle. You essentially allocate your 100 points across those 4 options to say, we're a lot like this, we're a bit like this, we're a bit like this. The beauty of that is that this is now math, right? You can take those results and you can use them to segment the data or look at the data in any way you want to. So here's some that we had from a particular client. So let's just talk through these a little bit, in the segmentation that they wanted. So up here, on this chart here, are the directors. These are the most senior people in this organization, right? The absolute leaders of this organization. And you won't be able to see this unless you're at the front row. We had to change the scale on their graph, right? So that's 60 for them. Everybody else, it's 30. So what the directors are saying is, first of all, in orange and blue, orange being current culture, blue being what we'd like it to be, our current culture is exactly what we want in the future. And we are super caring and collaborative and nurturing and looking after everybody. We're not really worried about numbers and results. That's not important to us because we believe in caring for our people. The graph immediately to the right of them are their -1s, right? So straight away you can see in orange their perception is, no, we are really numbers orientated. In blue, this is where we would like to be, like you. Yeah, that sounds really good. But actually we have a very different perspective, and so on with all the other different teams in the organization. And this is where we can now start to tie this towards strategy. Because if we look at these different groups and what they see right now and what they would like to have in the future, it helps us understand who is going to be aligned with the strategy, who isn't aligned with the strategy, and how we can bring that together. Okay? So if we wanted, and you'll get this quite a lot with businesses, they'll say we want to become more efficient, more effective. We want to become much more, process-driven. Well, straight away, you know that Team B here are going to be your darlings, all right, as well as Team A. Because in blue, they want that piece down in that control segment. They want to have that increase in process. So you know you're going to have them on side. For those of you sitting there, all very experienced HR people, you're quite right. Team B here are payroll, right? But it's also about the leadership piece. And remember I spoke to you about the leadership piece and how certain leadership is attached to certain quadrants. So back to this same organization that we did these results for. The highest score that they got on leadership was achievement orientated, which is associated with this bottom right-hand quadrant. Okay? So their predominant leadership style is pushing down into this bottom right-hand quadrant. The weakest leadership score that they got was supportive, up in the top left quadrant. So you're now able to say to this organization, as directors, you believe you are a really caring, nurturing organization. everybody else sees it very differently to you, and it's because of the leadership that is happening in the business right now and the organization right now. Okay? Now, a number of people did confess to me during coffee breaks that they're quite number nerds in this room, and I get that. But for me, the other piece that's important here is bringing in the human stories, bringing in the qualitative side to match up with the quantitative side. So what I always recommend is that on top of the results that you've just seen, is we take those results, we go and talk to a diverse group of people from across the business, at junior levels, senior levels, different departments. We say, talk to us about these results. Give us your lived experience of this. Give us some examples as to what this looks like and how it works. And it is quite interesting sometimes being an external provider doing that. You know, because it's like when you sit down next to somebody on a train or a plane that you've never met before. And within an hour, you're suddenly complaining about how much you dislike your house, your dog, your kids, your partner. Or is that just me? Okay, fair enough. You know, but it is interesting. We learn all sorts of stuff through doing these interviews because people start sharing things that you wouldn't get from the data as well. And so it's marrying up that qualitative and that quantitative piece that I feel is really important. So you draw those pieces together. And it starts then to help us have data, but data that marries up with the strategy. And that's a piece I'm trying to draw across here and how the leadership is coming in. Because there are sometimes some really challenging questions for the leadership to consider. Do they want to shift their leadership style and potentially their strategy to match the culture that is desired by the organization? Or do they want to drag the organization towards a culture that they think is important, towards a strategy that they think is important? And those are interesting choices and conundrums that have to be faced. But just to help them, if you like, as that senior executive C-suite, get this. You know, the Gallup productivity survey that was done recently, this tends to get senior leaders' attention when you start to talk to them about the fact, you know, that they could be basically 23% more profitable, 17% more productive if you start to shift the leadership style towards the culture that people want. And we'd all get that, right? If we're in a business or an organization, whether it be charity, third sector, public sector, private sector, if we're operating in a business and an organization where we feel happy, we're enjoying what we're doing, it's a culture that we really like, then that starts to drive up that discretionary effort, people giving it that little bit of an extra yard or two and working towards these sorts of things. But particularly that piece on absenteeism, you know, and reducing absenteeism. A bit of a gallop. I'm conscious because I only had 20 minutes, but I am happy to take any questions that may have come up on Slido if we do have any. If we don't, because I'm conscious we've got a couple of minutes left, by all means connect with me through the QR code up there, or the Quirk team and I are outside. Come and ask us any questions you'd like to out there. And at the very worst case, you can stand a chance of winning a bottle of champagne by coming along and seeing and talking to us. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed it. I spoke to 3 people before giving this speech who are part of your audience normally and also have been speakers at this event. So I do want to thank Mark Lawrence, Katrina Lindsay, and also Tracy Shepherd for all the advice they gave me in crafting this talk for you. So if you've enjoyed it, thank you very much. I'm very grateful. If you've hated it, then you can blame them. Thank you.
All right. So just a couple questions for you. First, there are questions about if this analysis only works at a certain scale, like better for bigger companies, smaller companies. You need critical mass. Is there a stage where it's too big to get discernible results from it?
So it always works better at a bigger scale. And there's no two ways about it, because it's a law of averages, right? It can work at a smaller scale. We've done it with organizations that are only 30 people strong. The slight challenge with that is if you want to segment the data, and you've only got 2 people working in a particular department, and then you've got that department, it's like, well, I know who said that, right? So instead of it being anonymous, it starts to become less anonymous, but it can work at any scale, absolutely. And we've done it up to 1,500 people and more.
Amazing. All right, thanks. You can find the Quirk team at their booth and enter for that bottle of champagne.
Great. Thanks very much, folks.